Are you a bored, stupidly rich millionaire with a huge house, a lot of space, and a love for reptiles? Probably not, because you're probably not watching this video then. Are you a broke college graduate slowly being crushed by the weight of your student loans, having to survive off things like frozen pizzas and TV dinners for sustenance, having to wear clothes from thrift stores that don't quite fit right, but that's all you can afford, window shopping for animals, and other things that you could never afford, but might bring some semblance of happiness to your life to stave off the depression from Sally Mae's cold, covetous fingers slowly wrapping themselves around your bank account and squeezing? Wait, no, that's me. Well, here's some crazy pricey reptiles. Today we're not talking about your everyday expensive reptiles. $500 pied ball python? Please. $800 lychee gecko? No thank you. $1,600 black-headed python?
You mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling.
That's right, Tom Hardy. It's time to treat yourself. But not literally, because some of the animals we're talking about today range in price from the cost of a used car to a small house. So we're gonna have a few rules for this. Rule number one, no genetic morphs. I don't want just a list of 5 crazy priced genetic ball python morphs. No albino rainbow boas, no albino sunstripe super saiyan ball pythons, none of that. These are gonna be actual species that actually cost this much. Rule number 2, these will be animals that are actually for sale. Not just animals that only breeders that know other breeders can get their hands on. These will be things that are online that I have found actual sales postings for on the various different reptile classified and sale websites over the last 10 or so years. These will be things that you or me could buy if I had the money, if Pepper pooped out 100s every 10 minutes instead of normal poops. Since, surprise, I don't have any of the animals we're going to be talking about today, I'm going to have kind of similar animals along for the ride that I use in my program. So for the next few, I'm going to have Roxy, my Cuban rock iguana. So number 5 for 5 of the most expensive reptiles you can possibly buy is the crocodile monitor. The croc monitor is absolutely massive. They're arguably the longest lizard on the planet. They have an insanely long tail, huge claws. They're arboreal. They have a very distinct head shape, and they live along the southern edge of New Guinea. For a long time, most of the pairs that they had in captivity either weren't adapting well to captivity or not breeding, and for many, many years, any eggs that were laid were almost all infertile. They were just proving very difficult to breed, and that really only seems to change fairly recently in the last few years. From what I could find, I found a few for sale back in like 2008 through 2010, but I didn't really see any available again until about 2016. So how much is it going to cost you to own one of the world's largest lizards legally? I mean, here in New York, they're illegal, so I couldn't own them here. But if you're in a state where they're legal, it's going to cost you quite a bit. And I mean, that price also depends on if it's wild caught or captive bred, what size it is, how old it is, what breeder you're getting it from. So for wild caught, from what I could find, it was about $2,000 to $4,000 or $5,000. And mind you, these were all subadults or adult females, nothing really over 5 feet long, no adult males or anything. And wild caught, these animals are not going to want to work with you. They're going to be flighty or aggressive, or just, they are not going to be fun to work with, putting it mildly. For captive born and bred babies, from what I could find for this year and the year before at least, the price ranged from anywhere from $5,000 or $6,000 all the way up to $9,000. It was kind of hard to find numbers because there's not a whole lot of them for sale. A lot of people are probably holding on to those babies to try and breed more of them. For number 4, Australia's second largest lizard, and yet another varanid on our list, the lace monitor. Absolute behemoth of a monitor lizard. They are fairly unlike most of the monitor lizards that are kept in captivity over here in the States. They actually are fairly arboreal as well, kind of like the croc monitor, but they do spend a good bit of amount of time on the ground. So because of Australia's ban on exporting or importing animals in and out of their country, there just weren't many lace monitors outside the country when that law went into effect. Okay. Now they have been actually proven fairly easy to breed in captivity. It's just there wasn't a whole lot to work with. The price has slowly been coming down on these lizards, mostly the normal phase, because there's actually two different kind of forms for this lizard. There's the normal phase, which is your typical looking lace monitor. It's a very dark coloration with yellow cream colored spots on the back. And then you have the Bell's phase, which is almost like this yellow cream and black barred, almost like thick zebra striped going down the back pattern. And that's really just a locality found in pockets within the lace monitor's range. So how much if you want one of these beautifully colored varanids? So for a baby normal phase, you're looking at $3,000 to $4,000. For a Bell's phase, that jumps up to a minimum of $6,000 or $7,000. For an adult normal phase, you're looking at $7,000 to $10,000. For a Bell's phase, don't even bother because no one is selling those. Those are like golden gooses. They basically lay golden eggs with babies that make a bunch of money. I love this lizard. It's gorgeous. It's probably in my top 5 favorite lizard species. I worked with them when I was over there. I know people over there that are breeding them and have them as pets. And I would probably sell my firstborn to get one over here. I can make that joke. I don't have kids. Number 3 is another large reptile from the Isle of New Guinea. And that is the Boelen's python. This is Olive. She's my Australian brown water python, who is also found on the Isle of New Guinea, granted on the southern edge. And if you want to watch more of her and some of my other Australian reptiles, you can click on this video here. Boelen's pythons are one of the most gorgeous snakes I have ever seen. They have this stunning black iridescent body with this whitish cream colored underneath and striping on the first half of the body. They're a very secretive snake that lives up in these forested mountainous regions in New Guinea, so not a lot is known about them in the wild, and the local government has a ton of legal protections on the snake to try and stop people from exporting it out of the country. I'm sure it still happens on an illegal scale, but not as much. Now this is a fairly big snake. They can grow to be over 10 feet long, weigh over 25, 30 pounds, and they're very rare in captive collections. Captive bred ones apparently do pretty well in captivity, but wild caught ones are just apparently a nightmare in captivity. They don't adjust well. They're almost impossible to breed. They really don't do well with the transition. Back in early, maybe 2010, 2011, I found a couple for sale that went for $3,000, $4,000, maybe $5,000. But then I just couldn't find any for sale until probably the last 2, maybe 3 years. Nowadays, if you want a healthy captive bred one, you're looking at $6,000 to $10,000. I couldn't find a single adult for sale because everyone's holding on to them to breed. So this one is stretching my number 2 a little bit. They are for sale, but very, very rarely. So number 2 goes to the shingleback skink, one of the coolest lizards on the planet and a close cousin of the blue-tongued skink like Big Lou here. And you can actually watch the video he's in, 5 of my strangest animals right here. So through my research and kind of internet searchings, I could only find a handful of sales over the last 10 years on the typical reptile sale pages, but there were sales, and they are just such a unique looking lizard. They are just covered in this cool, ancient, primordial looking scale armor from nose to tail tip, and they're found throughout southern Australia and up into central Queensland. Most of the ones that we have in private collections and zoos over here are actually from imported European stock, because remember Australia has that ban, so no legal shinglebacks are coming out of Australia at least. So yeah, a decade or so ago, you could get a shingleback skink depending on the subspecies and the size. You could get one for $4,000 to $6,000 from what I could find. Nowadays, finding one for sale is very rare because so many breeders are holding on to them to try and breed more. They're another species that's proven very difficult to breed in captivity over here in the States. But from what I could find, if you can find a baby for sale now, they'll go anywhere for 8 to 12 grand for one. And this is the smallest animal on this list. And again, that price depends on genetic line and where it was imported from and all that. And now number 1, something that I have actually seen babies of for sale here at reptile expos in the Northeast before, the Aldabra tortoise. Aldabra tortoises are the second largest tortoise species on the planet after the Galapagos tortoise, which is also expensive in its own right. But because of its endangered status and permitting and licensing and weird not crossing state lines rules and stuff, I just didn't include it. I am here with Maui, who's currently walking off, my sulcata tortoise, who is the 3rd largest tortoise species on the planet. They live in the islands of the Aldabra Atoll in the Seychelles, and they just get absolutely massive. Their carapace length can exceed 4 feet. They can grow to be over 500 pounds. It is just a gigantic tortoise. So pricing for this one was a little bit weird. They're not exactly hard to breed in captivity. It seems like quite a few people have kind of got it figured out. So they're not super rare like shingleback skinks, and most of the ones that I've seen for sale are not wild caught like crocodile monitors. So if you want a captive bred baby, don't get one. But if you would like one of these, they are out there. So your typical going rate for little ones that are under 10 inches vary anywhere from 2 to 6 grand. Once you kind of get into that next tier where you're getting tortoises that are a foot or two or a little longer, price jumps up to 10, 20, maybe even 30 grand. Your adults that have a couple feet on them, a few decades in, those ones you're looking at least 40K, 50K for one. I did find one post from a very credible tortoise breeder that had a 60-year-old pair for sale, and the fee for these two tortoises was $130,000 for both. That's the cost of a mortgage for like a small house. So for the cost of a small house, you too can have two big tortoises that'll outlive you, your kids, and maybe their kids. So those are 5 of the most expensive pet reptiles that you could buy. Not you, literally. Like the video if you learned something, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the animal videos that I upload weekly. Comment down below if one of the reptiles I talked about today, or maybe one I didn't mention, is on your millionaire treat yourself reptile list. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you later. No, get out of my shirt. No, no. Alien? Anyone? Alien? Roxy. Oh, are you joking, Roxy?